I mean, I'll let you go ahead and introduce yourself, Koichi, and get started with your presentation, unless Kathy has anything else.
Okay, very well then.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead. Kathy, you want to?
No, I was just going to say how pleased we are that you're here with us. And when we were doing the rehearsal bit that or the touch-in session that we had a couple weeks ago, it was just so wonderful to hear how enthusiastic you are about being part of this and sharing everything that you have with the print community. So thank you for being here.
My pleasure, and thank you for creating the space to connect the people together, especially in a very difficult time. And I really am very honored to be part of this. So thank you very much for giving this chance to talk with it, tell my story. Providing the space and connecting people together is extremely important, and then that's not something new. And then, but of course, this world we're living right now with technology we have, it is possible to do so. It was really unthinkable from when I was 20s and so on. But it is great honor to be connected with all the artists here. So today, I'd like to talk about my life work through the idea perspective of static and dynamic. In this context, the static as a still or minimum motion, and dynamic as a changeable, active, and adaptable. Animism as an idea that natural object and the universe itself has a soul, and supernatural power sounds like out of my reach. But natural power seems to be obtainable with the correct approach. People haven't flown kites for millennia for relaxation, as a recreation, military signaling, and scientific experimentations. The practice originated in China around 3,000 years ago, later spread to Southeast Asia and beyond. 18th century Japan, kites were used for festival, spectacle entertainment, competition, celebration. It brought people together to experience the natural force. Thus, kites become a symbol of unity and hope. A documentation of daily activity such as this, repetition of a geometry echoes from the mountaintop. The roof peaks over the mountain, and the kite goes beyond the reach. In the 20th century, there were other applications such as surveillance aerial photograph for military use. And this study gave birth to the aerodynamics. And later, the first flight takes place in North Carolina, Outer Banks. I wanted to bring my artworks to outside of a gallery museum setting. And flying kites helped me to visualize natural energy. Also a good reason to go outside and revisiting the sense of unity and hope. The vehicle I used for this task, I made a hexagon kite called Sanjo Rokkaku kite. And this design, unchanged for 2,000 years, the ratio of 5 to 4 hexagon, structurally, aerodynamically, made sense. This device gives me an opportunity to experience and understand power of wind. Lift, drag, tension, weight. These terms are a metaphor of life to me, and finding that sufficient balance is necessary. But sometimes there is no wind. I need to accept the reality. Sometimes I feel that gravity is over my head. The only option in the situation is waiting, but thinking something. Adjusting bridle loop lengths to find the correct balance and tension. Fine-tuning is essential for different types of wind. If it fails to do so, it will not fly, or it could break against force of wind. Flying them in various locations and conditions, document the behavior and study for improvements. At the end, this activity makes me healthy and creative. This is an example of a kite display indoor. And try to make it interactive. Controlling the angle of attack by pulling control bar makes difference in air resistance and pull of gravity. And connecting with the other artists is always stimulating. Here's an artist worked with the CNC router with a color marker instead of drills. Smartphone selfies become optical art. There was a proposed project at SGCI 2020, but it's postponed to 2023. It involves 37 artists to make kites and then fly them at the location. So here they are. I'd like to introduce these kites we made together. They're all tested and qualified as a true kite. First, I send out Tyvek to everybody, and each artist will draw, print, relief printing, silk screening, and direct paint, or combination of all type of the printing method. My request was make it graphic on steroid. High intensity colors, full color lithography, woodcut, and metallic paint was applied in Tyvek. And highly detailed woodcut and playful symmetry design was taking place. Translation of a printed image to become a dynamic moving object. Text and a strong geometry helps to speed up power of signifier. And figures on the sky, they're ready to catch the air and for dancing. Patterns with a visual rhythm by familiar object become texture and it holds the content. Transition from past to present. Repetition of small printed elements become patterns. Breathtaking contrast in gesture and intense color. Playful spirit in correlations. Tremendous energy went into making these images. Narrative of a statement and a poetic silence. Layers of transparent color and shapes. Collective images of woodcut to singular subject. And innovation of sophisticated printing methods. Visual impact and subliminal content. Thank you for all participating to this project. Most of the kites were shipped to San Juan last March, right before the pandemic hit the North America. And they're waiting to catch the Caribbean trade wind. These kites are made of many small parts, but they are exchangeable and replaceable. So maintenance is relatively easy once system is set up for it. Anticipating and prepared for malfunction and expected gusty conditions, and be ready to replace damaged parts. The main reason I chose the rock kite design is its ability to roll and pack small. That's easy to travel. Carbon fiber rods are not invincible. They do break with a kite crushes, or lines do get cut when they cross each other. Well, that's part of the kite flying anyway. Love the fate and learn to adapt. Once it flies, it is officially baptized kite with its own will. Each kite is unique, and then this difference affect its performance. Kind of like personality or its tendency. Then soul has been captured into the plastic and carbon materials. That's how I'd like to see it. But once it flies, it changes its meaning of the object. And I learned to sort of respect this object And here's this wonderful landing right here. Unfortunately, I don't have an audio in this video, but and they do make some sound. That's a Siamese print. Flying in different conditions such as this, cold air has this packed density, and they fly very well in an environment like this. In the beginning, it was a paper airplane, and later it became a structural wing. And then after that, I learned to make these non-structural self-inflatable kite. They're a lot of fun making these guys. Designing and drawing these kites become important part of my engraving practice. So here's a frigate bird soaring the sky without flapping wing, travel up to 300 miles per day, according to Wikipedia. Clear adaptation and evolution. Perfect design for kite. Here's my attempt to study such form in printmaking studio. Tension and then strengths, finding the correct balance. But over-design and working too late at night, failed project. But it was important to go through this passage to looking back now. What I learned from this is to remove unnecessary things. So here we go, lift, drag, tension, and weight. Collectives of the windsocks together to make wing shape. Here is some low aspect ratio. Unstable, but it swims like a shrimp. In 2015, we did a collaboration with a Cannonball Press. They printed the 12th zodiac image printed on a ripstop nylon, making a sphere like a soccer ball pattern, hexagons and pentagon shapes sewing up together to create this sphere. And then we had this a fan to blow air from below to maintain the shape. Here's a view of interior. And you see these little tiny holes there, and that's the escape vent. And folding a printed paper to make a prototype for the kite, or thinking about kite designs. And then eventually become like a paper plane. And tension between folded geometry lines with the engraved lines across each other. Here's an example of the calculated geometry and the calligraphy coexist in the same space. The contrast intensifies the static tension. Material speaks its soul in a quiet moment with constant light and action. How to utilize the soul of the material and maintain its integrity with a care. Having a protection with authorization from natural material. These elements or images I seeking and collect, and then put them into the kite images. Also exploring the design from insect wing, tension with the bamboo and the string. And these are what we call a high aspect ratio kite. Design from butterfly to cicadas. Here's a display in the gallery Shoal Creek. Play and interact. I made a visit to Sanjo, Japan, the birthplace of the Rokkaku hexagon kite. There is a kite maker, 6th generation of a family business still on making. Keep the tradition of a unity and hope. 350 years tradition of a Sanjo Kite Festival continues. As long as the festival keep reoccurring, kite maker cuts and dry bamboo, then stretch paper and paint with anticipation of flight. This is a labor of optimist, connecting a people or looking up for something exciting. Autonomous device dancing in the sky, and they began to have dialogues. I have been making kites for only 7 years. I learned a lot. It helps me to see what and how to eliminate unnecessary things. It makes me to create creative in this natural world. And most importantly, it keeps me healthy. My interest in art began from earthwork, low-fired ceramic object made to look natural whalebone, eliminating any record of a human hand, buried underground at the various locations throughout Oregon coast, then dig out to excavate later on. Even today, there are many pieces buried and it's taking the process of decomposition. This was type of activity I was doing undergraduate student when I was 24 at Pacific Northwest College of Art in Portland, Oregon. This was my perception of memento mori, idea of ephemerality. All universal structure and object are programmed to decompose, regardless of race, gender, faith, wealth, all the spectrum of political beliefs, something we all have in common. Vanitas, 17th century Dutch still life paintings, was something I kept looking at. Vanity displayed with the symbolic inevitability of death, enclosed energy in compound reality. Making lithography prints in Krakow, Poland in the early 90s was a very educational experience. Submit myself into the Polish Artists Union and in making prints, sharing a press together with the artist, escaped from Yugoslavia, the country divided and dissolved. Witnessed and understood the consequence of Soviet communism. My ambition and ignorance were beaten down. This passage I took was not practical nor easy. Looking back now, it was like walking on a thin ice. But because of that, it made all the difference in my life. 6 similar sizes of lithography stone were in action. Grinding stone in the morning, etch and roll up, print in the afternoon. Second etch and roll up. In the evening, draw the next stone with frozen cosmetic eyeliner. The system became habitual, like a Newton's law of inertia. Once flywheel turns, it will keep the momentum and maintain the velocity. Every day for 9 months, eliminating unnecessary action, single round, edition of 5 each. After that, came back to Portland, USA, and exhibited works. This lifestyle of self-outsourcing minimized the cost of production. Annual exhibition became harvest time to generate the budget for the following year. Every July, for 5 years, I returned to Portland, Oregon to exhibit my prints to generate funds. By doing this, I learned to understand how immigration and customs duty work become obstacle to my intention. Boundaries are conditional. There is no such thing as a permanent wall. History teaches us. Later, I got to study engraving in the Academy of Art in Bratislava, Slovakia, under Professor Dusan Kalai. And then I got to study with Elizabeth Ingram and Walter Jewell at the University of Alberta in Edmonton, Canada. They taught me the creative adaptations. Having to meet such a great teachers in my life, that gift was given to me, so I must process this and then transfer that to you now. On the surface, there is a record of activities, static and dynamic, finding the balance and then trust the nature. Spontaneous as well as decisive, record roller mark became a phone. Transparency enhances illusion of depth or suggestion of potential energy. It may happen. Or expectation of float. Binding the device to hold the tension of separation for a moment and looking through the stable past. The moment witnessed disappeared, or unseen power from underneath. Expansion continues. Or division takes place occasionally, but there is still desire to connect. Confrontation, and trying to see the larger picture. Breathing in and an exhale out. Hope this will last long, and it'll be fun to meet friends in the process. In 2005, I made a series of monotypes. They were made under 25 minutes each. It was part of my roller cleaning ritual at the end of the day of printing, and using roller as a paint brush. My goal was to make something from byproduct to minimize the waste. So roller cleaning should be fun, and I'm really looking forward to clean the roller at the time. Temperature control to transparency and illusion of the depth. Atmosphere inspired from 16th century Northern Renaissance landscape painting, as well as the school of Barbizon. Liquid-like dynamic moment, unstoppable motion. Because they are less planned, they become purely record mark making. Yet, it does suggest a space, and the form began to appear. They hold sustained attention and hold still for unlimited time. Divide the space to create that illusion of depth. Here's my first visit to Texas, 2007. Working together with artists like Don Taylor and David Newman gave me an opportunity to see the community of artists support each other. Connecting that through the steps. Transparent darkness hold the silence. Atmospheric perspective makes the distance. And direction light occasionally bends. Time passes evenly for unknown space and place. I taught at the Utah State University for 6 years. This gave me an ample opportunity to experience and then study the unique open landscape of the high desert. Hiking in the night under the moonlight displays a different world from the daytime. There are differences in time passing for large work to smaller works. Investigating the layers of time, making these miniature cross-section of the Earth's crust with the different colors of clay, allow me to learn and simulate plate tectonic movement and erosion. Stored potential energy surface occasionally. This simulation landscape provides me a sense of the vast scale of the planet, as well as how small I am. I took hard ground copper plate to open sky locations, study from seemingly static rock formation, but it is in constant motion. Dynamic Colorado Plateau continue to rise. Drawing on copper plate with smoked hard ground with backpack, walk through desert of southern Utah. This place is called the Jacob's Chair near Hanksville, Utah. Not only drawing the geological structure, but also atmospheric changes, visible and invisible beauty. Encountering such a light under different weather conditions, winter high desert is surprisingly filled with informative events taking place. Trying to capture the sense of monumentality, I felt slow, consistent changes taking place uninterrupted. Working in a place like this brings many challenges, such as hard ground melting due to high temperature, or sudden weather change and a flash flood could cut access to safe refuge. Once plate has been established, this could be used in many different applications. The essential nature of the printmaking, such as multiple, but also adaptable to combine with other images to change the definition of the image itself. Selection and then combinations. And vacancy becomes saturated. Delayed, filtered voice. And splitting an image in half. And start rotating itself. By folding intaglio print right after it printed while ink is still wet, then goes through the press, image began to rotate. My love of printmaking is in copper engravings because its low-tech capability, anytime, anywhere, non-toxic, with minimum tools required. I am inspired by 16th century Northern Renaissance graphic work such as this. Another type of the record of activities, human activities, in a frozen moment from 450 years ago. But I can almost hear the breathing of the artist. Trying to make illusion of a form and a content with a material that resist, creating collective meaning by meaningless line with an intention of total competition. I am interested in the slow speed of work and the physicality of the material. I enjoy the intensity of the passing time while carving on the surface. Each static line may be insignificant, but woven record became dynamic form and a whole illusion of content. Such marriage between humanity and technology become universal communication, like this dynamic facial expression that hard to forget. Play and seek without confirmation bias, not in search of a particular result. Experimentation comes with failure, but if there are 2% of success, it's worth doing so. Be open to discover something unexpected. Life is a miracle, and death is natural. While working on the symmetry, I use a mirror to see the reflection of the copper plate. Here's a peaceful moment in the studio after all day of printing. I had a wonderful opportunity to work with the influential artist, Sally French, in Kauai Island in Hawaii. She has an extensive collection of vintage toys such as this. And I just have to use these images. This one is a King of the Wild Frontier baby figure. Collecting and searching to fuse the anticipation for new content. And fusing that two elements for combination. And potential audio response, image like this. And memory from my childhood dream. And become the new image, combination number 2. Practice of selection and combination gives me to develop unexpected result. New composition made of two parts synthesize the symmetry, start to make sense of nonsense. Conceptual adaptation taking place. Change of orientation gives a new perspective like palindrome. Familiar form to unfamiliar content. Something recognizable and something from far away. Assembling of visual elements then create that new vocabulary. By printing two images on top of each other, complex and compound, another unique approach of a printmaking idea. They are similar but different. Each one is unique. Some trait carries on to the next generation of image. So two plates together. I call it mother plate and father plate. Cognitive familiarity. Or they could have a sibling with different mother or different father. Mixture of different DNAs. They may have the relatives, but its own unique impressions. Each image contains stories, but when fused together, it influences each other and it changes the meaning. It's hard to not to see both of image at once. But this metrics gives the opportunity to create that new content. Memory from past. And sometimes it delays communication. Transformation taking place. And occasional eye contact catches attention. Memory from the past. Or the things never happened before. I'm mixing the images, the cultural symbol to industrial materials. But I found that this symmetry, and all of a sudden, it become a new things. So occasionally I think about what is a new idea. As often combination two old ideas together. Well, it doesn't work all the time, but sometimes it works. In Polish language, there is a word called kombinować. To combine or arrange, but also it has a different meaning. Cheating or taking advantage in game. Sometimes this kombinować word can be used as a negative connotation. But that was unnecessary at the time to survive. Detection of form and awareness of the human quality and structural integrity in inside, and discover the unexpected combinations. It's incredible to test that human mind and then how they sort of develop and then influence each other. Something very recognizable, something from the past, and something came from totally different cultures, but it has its unique trait. So these are extremely fun to make those things. I made these prints in a Syracuse University. And their graduate students and undergraduate students helped me to print these. And then we've been very, very productive. I took about 10 plates with me and then start creating a matching together. And of course, the failure is part of it. Some are better than others, but they're all its unique impression. Some of the images are coming from archaeological discovery from the past to the history of the human activity and recent event, Or it could be just simply a toy we create to entertain ourselves. But the gaze that we encounter is everywhere. It's not just the toys, it's everywhere. It's in the industrial material, it's in our architecture, it's in the automobile we drive. They're everywhere, if you look for it. Making a kite, and I like to have the sort of quality of the human expression, if you say. Or it doesn't necessarily have to be a human, but some sort of a living things, the spirit. And that's what I was searching for. And later on, I got interested in working with the architectural, naval architecture, structure, and so on. So here's a series of the prints from the King of Wild Frontier toy. Putting sunglasses on. So these are entire print with a copper plate. And the image is about 18 by 12. They're not big prints, and they're relatively small prints. Therefore, it goes pretty fast. So that means that it's easier for me to take a real risk because the loss is not that significant. Discovering something, and very end, I will find something, some sort of a result that it's not necessarily I was looking for. But by taking action, I run into something. I think that's the important part. Occasionally, I do go to studio, and I have no idea what I'm going to do. And I'm polishing a copper plate, and I have no idea what I'm going to draw. But once it started, it just sort of naturally happens. Let it go, and then try to be honest with my own interest. Different type of structure in architecture, past, current. Some are dry point, some I use the mezzotint rockers, but mostly etching and engravings. So these series of prints, they do relate to each other. And so endlessly, I can just create that new combinations. And that's sort of part of the fun. I guess there are, in definition, it's a mono print. I guess I could make an edition out of it, but I'm quite happy that I just make one out of it. Sharing same axis, which is a very interesting thing, and sort of synthesize in its own way. So here's the print I was making 2006. I don't know if it's history repeat itself, or I'm still on the same orbit. 15 years later, I'm still dealing with this shape. It was March 2020, COVID-19 pandemic hit North America. I was in a big home mountain in northern Wyoming, flying kites. But I have to discontinue the project and then return to Tennessee in the middle of the project. Back in Knoxville, I bought a small Conrad press and turned my living room into the print shop and making these impressions. Some old plate reclaimed, and then some etched lines. And began to become like a stupa, or shish kebab of old prints put together. Making new combinations. And these are displayed at the Creekside Studio. So thank you, Tracy and Judy. It is possible to continue working and then being productive in this limited condition, both static and dynamic. And take a break and then get back to work. Life continues, and then we cannot stop it. So let's keep on making, because it's worth spending time in the studio making something rather than thinking about making. Idea must be translated into action. Here's an example of action by University of Tennessee, Knoxville printmaking graduate student-led online printmaking symposium on March 12th and 13th. T for Texas, T for Tennessee. Passing the torch to the new generation of artists. So I'm learning or trying to expand on what I'm born to do and learn to expose to new experience, also accepting a failure, and get to choose then define meaning of my life. Each of us, what we do now will form the future and it become a past. So I like to focus on right in front of me, drawing, carving, cutting, etching, rolling, printing, all wiping, doing something. The meaning arrives later. So thank you for listening to my story, and thank you for creating this space. I hope you well in this uneasy time. So here I would like to end with with a quote by Lucio Seneca, 2,000 years old wisdom. Life is very short and anxious for those who forget the past, neglect the present, and fear the future. It is not that we have a short time to live, but sufficiently generous amount has given to us for the highest achievement if it were all well invested. But when it is wasted in heedless luxury and spent on no good activity, we are forced at last by death's final constraint to realize that it has passed away before we knew it was passing. Life is long if you know how to use it. Thank you.
So sorry, I just realized I was on mute.
Okay.
So thank you so much for sharing that with us. That was a beautiful quote to end on. We do have some questions from the audience that I thought we could just ask and let you go ahead and answer. So let me see. Sangmi Yu says, I see eyes staring at us through your symmetrical intaglios. Do you consider some kind of psychological impacts on the viewer or raise a certain awareness with those?
Yeah, I mean, I'm like this is like throwing the dice, I guess. I don't really think really deeply about it, but then later on when I look at it, discover something. So while I'm making, I'm in a production mode. But yes, yeah, there is this interesting psychological impact will take place, and I think everybody will respond in very different ways. So I do use some cultural icons to something extremely noticeable and defining what it is, but also something that are very difficult to define. So there's a different speed of the recognition, I guess. Maybe that's what I'm playing with. I hope I answered the questions I mean.
Let me see our next question. Are they all different plates or do you rework them?
Yeah, I mean, I use the front and back, and then sometimes the I do rework them and constantly. And then I have a plate. In fact, right here, I work with those plates that are from like 10 years ago, and then I still. That's something about copper plates that it's a metallic object, and then I can slowly polish and work on it too. Or sometimes I work in the backside. Or things that I never finished in past that sort of just back burner and just pulling out and start doing something. But I mean, I guess right now I'm very limited to. I do use ferric chloride, but it is my living room, so I try not to use acid too much to not to damage my sink. So I've been doing a lot of engraving. Therefore, yes, the things I've been working right now is a brand new work, and it's fun. It's definitely that. And keep it clean, keep it simple.
Awesome. So we have one from Coco Rico, who's one of our artists in PrintEXPO, the print fair today. But she asks if your work has moved in a more sculptural direction.
I mean, I don't really. I think printmaking, I guess, especially working with the metal, I mean, that's sort of sculpture in a way. And then, yeah, I don't know how to divide that 2D, 3D aspect. And then I still making a flat piece. I love making that sort of illusion of the space that could happen in a piece of paper. And that really occasionally, there's some kind of sort of misunderstanding. Sometimes we think that the 3D object has somewhat of an advantage, but there's a lot of disadvantage too. So there's advantage in 2D image that I don't really have to worry about gravity, for instance, or rain, wind, any of that. I mean, I can just create the world in the 2D world. So I do work both way, and but the kite is something that interacts with the environment and something that I'm very, very interested in. And so yeah, I guess I could probably work on both ends. But there's something about the simple drawing engraving is that that's a foundation to me.
That's awesome. I noticed like was it a sand sculpture that you were?
Yeah, it's called
a backward play.
It's a kinetic sand. That's the toy. I guess a Swedish toy that you occasionally find or used to be. I don't know right now in the pandemic, but you find that in a dentist office or libraries, place like that. It's a fantastic this material mixture with silicone with the sand, so it doesn't get messy. So yeah,
very cool. We have another question. I guess connects to your kite, so I'll ask this one first. But what does flying have to do with the content in your work?
Flying is a sort of ritual in a way. So yeah, the content. I mean, my own artwork usually the kite I make usually have a face or at least eyeball or there's somewhere to focus onto it, and then I kind of enjoy the different type of expression taking place. The reason that is that when kite flies, it doesn't stay flat. It changes the forms, and then when wind blows, it moves actually. So it's almost this sort of the facial expression taking place. So that's what I like to do. But by flying it, but before flying it, there's a anticipation. So it hasn't flown yet, but I'm still thinking about flying while I'm making it. But once it flies, it just it becomes kind of different definition. That it become the artwork I made it, but it's alive in a way. It's like sort of like my friends in a way, So flying is like the sort of baptized moment. So
that's really nice.
Yeah.
This actually leads into our next question. But I know music is important to you too. You've talked about your connection to natural forces like wind. But do you feel that there's a connection to music in your work?
Yeah, I wonder. Like when I'm engraving, and then I'm basically engraving patterns. I guess I make those a bunch of lines together, and then some more lines are similar to each other, and then it's a repetition, right? So I mean, there's no whole lot of sound, but when I'm looking at the different lengths or different quality of line together, very musical. It's a rhythmical. And then when lines carves and then when I start forming it and then just sort of create that bunch of frequency, like a chord, different sound together became create that emotion. And I think that's what taking place. So yes, I don't really constantly think about it, but when I'm carving, sort of kind of like similar to playing music in a way, exploring something. So when I play ukulele, and then sometimes I just stay and then I'm going to only use 2 chords, and what can I do within that 2 chords? So there's a bit of challenge to it. So yeah, music does a lot to do with my mind, and it's a very healthy activity, I think. It is similar to drawing, I guess.
I definitely get a sense of vibration from your intaglio prints, and I feel like that vibration is just kind of it translates through the different mediums, and then when you bring it up into the kite and all of that. So very cool. And then going back to a question from Karen Pittman, who is also an artist on our print fair this year. When did you decide to pursue a career as an artist? At what stage in your life?
As a printmaker?
I think so.
Okay. Well, I was I was a geology major when I was in Wyoming, and because a lot of this industry over there is a lot to do with oil and then mining and industry. But when I really discover or learn about that, and it sort of kind of broke my heart. And I always painted and draw, and that was a hobby to me. But then my ceramic teacher, I was taking a ceramic course, and my ceramic teacher told me, like, well, I think you should pursue as a career. And then career? Like, well, no, this is art is like a hobby to me, right? And then, but I never really thought that I'm going to make a living out of it. But really, I asked my question to myself that, what is it worth doing it? What is it worth doing it? And then what I can continue doing it. And then I compare those two together and study with the earth, and that still continues in a very different aspect, not necessarily in an academic way. But I think that was a time that transitioned from the community college studying the geology to ceramic. So yeah, I think that was a time I pursuing the art, and then it was early 20s, and then I encountered lithography. That was the first printmaking I took the class, and that was it. And I just fell in love with this process and paper, and then the one thing about ceramic is it takes a lot of space, and heavy, and it requires a lot of the physical space. But the printmaking is something that lithography stone, that like after say goodbye to stone, I can just keep on prints and I keep the prints and walk away. So that mobility was very, very attractive for me. So
very nice. Let's see. I have a question from Robert Fleming. Mm-hmm. Do you approach your monoprints differently than your intaglio pieces? The monoprints that you did in Italy, do they bring the two processes together?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, monotype is because tools very different, like rollers or paintbrush versus burin. I mean, burin is a very specific tools, and then also it's very clear that if I made a mistake in the burin, it's hard to hide it. Monotype is so spontaneous, and then I can let myself relatively freer. So I think that's the major difference between those two. But essentially, I'm trying to create the somewhat of a form or landscape or illusion with the depths or start creating a content. These are not that different, and I think it's both of them are sort of category of drawing. So it's just the tool is different, and then one is extremely big. I mean, the roller, I tend to use a bigger roller, and versus the burin it's a precision. So, and also I kind of talked a little bit about that sort of time difference, and then smaller work is that it's relatively, of course, it's very intimate, and then versus the bigger work is more dynamic. So I think that's the difference, perhaps.
Well, and I guess speaking of that intimacy with the work, Adam Berman asks, Koichi, you spoke about being honest with your interests. Please tell us more about this.
Honest with my own interest. Yeah, I guess, every day is different, right? Also, of course, we're a product of just the inferential information coming through everywhere, and then we hear things, and then we watch things and read things, and it does inference. And then, of course, or make us angry or something. And then these are the kind of type of things that happens. So inference is hard to put aside. But I do intentionally, especially when I'm engraving, I do shut off my phone to like airplane mode, for instance, or just try not to open computer till a certain time. I like to work in the early morning. So it's in the morning time is like sort of precious time, and I'm relatively fresh, and I'm not hearing any bad news from the television or news or something. So that's the time that I like to work with it. And then my honest inference, or find that in the day-to-day is different. And then that one time that when I was at the Sally French's studio in Kauai in Hawaii, that she has this incredible toy collection, and then that was something just sort of happened to happen. And so I'm trying to be open to anything. And if I travel anything, or even live in Knoxville, walk into the gas station and then see somebody's wearing t-shirts, these things that got stuck in my mind. So these things that are randomly I don't really discriminate. I just put everything in my sketchbook. And later
Okay.
on, I think about it, like, why was I interested in this, and well, let's just sort of do some investigation on that too, and then later on just start forming the reason, I think. So I think that's being honest, which means that is like I try not to judge anything when I see something that fascinated me or interested me. I'm just going to accept that. And then later on, I evaluate, collect them. I guess it has to have a lot of them. And then when I see that sort of tendency of my choices I make, I guess that's a sort of reflection of my interest. And then that's kind of how I see it. So that yeah, being honest. Yeah, those are very challenging things, because we often make artwork for somebody, or being considered about receptions, or maybe a political correct statement we have to make and such, and or try not anger anybody, or try to an opposite, that is, I'm very angry, so I'm going to make other people angry. I mean, that could be a great motivation. But to me, the anger and rage are temporarily a motivation. They are reactive motivation. So I try to focus on what I love to do, and then what but reason I get angry because I love something, therefore I'm angry at something. So finding that sort of trying to be sort of optimistic and positive, and then yeah, this anger and rage just are hard things to carry, I guess. I can choose to not react. How about that?
Maybe you can choose to put it in your sketchbook and
I can just collect it. Yeah, being honest. Yeah,
that's really great. I think that thoughtfulness and the intention with reflection, it definitely comes through with your work, because at least for me, when I'm standing in front of one of your large intaglio and monoprints, it's you enter into a space of like meditation with your work. So I definitely appreciate that. That sense that I get from your work, but also I guess I now understand that is your intention with it. That, like, that's what you're putting into it as well.
Thank you. Yeah.
Let's see. We have a lot of thank yous, and that's so inspiring to hear from people. Let's see. Oh, this is a really nice comment. Argo Mayer says, Koichi, thank you so much for your generosity with the print community. We appreciate you so much.
Thank you. It is my honor to be part of it. And hopefully next year we get to see each other in the real life in Austin.
I certainly hope so. And then I'm going to ask one more question before we close out our programming for today. But Sever Black asks, can you tell us more about how you use your sketchbook in creating work?
How I use a sketchbook in creating work. Yeah. Just, and again, try not to have a filter. I mean, this is it's a dialogue to myself. I'm not going to show to anybody. I mean, it'd be probably embarrassing things. It's written in there. So before I die, I probably should burn down. And then, but yes, there is a sort of dialogue, and then really dig into my own sort of even the dark side or the embarrassing side, any of that thing, and then collecting them, and then just occasionally I do dig into some of the old sketchbook from a few years back, and it's like looking like just laughing, like, oh, I was so stupid, just looking back. But again, at the time I was excited and I was really honest about it, or I was submerged into that thoughts and then part. But yeah, it's a funny thing when time passes, just sort of things changes and perspective changes, and so yeah, continuous collective of information in the sketchbook is essential, and then to me, and then I think many artists does that practice for a reason. So yeah, it is a private dialogue to myself, and then by doing that, and I think there is a way to discover something, and these are the sort of fertilizer for that making art.
Interesting. It's so funny that you say that, because I also feel that sketchbooks are a very intimate and like personal thing. And then I think about, the sketch, like whenever artists are long gone, and universities and libraries and museums are pulling, sketches from an artist's sketchbook, and they're just like displaying it for the world. And of course, as spectators, like we want to understand and we want to see that, but it's just such an interesting concept. Do you think you'll burn all of your sketchbooks to keep them private, or?
I don't know. If I'm prepared, I'm not. I still have a lot of them, and I don't want to burn it right now because I'm not.
No, I'm not encouraging you to by any means.
But funny. Okay, here's something about that sort of mark making, and then hiking in Utah. Occasionally, there are like petroglyphs on the rocks, right? And then these are done, 5,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago, very very old, ancient. And then there are another type of a petroglyph that is made in the 1700s, which is relatively recent compared to those Anasazi petroglyphs. But there are considered as a graffiti. And but it is a human activities, and then there is the the record of the human activity. So it is a very significant. I mean, can be disturbing, but it is a significant record of the humanity in a way. So
amazing. Cool. Are there any last minute thoughts you want to share with us?
Well, I'm kudos for you guys that made this happen, and then extremely inspiring, and to many people out there. And yeah, this is a very challenging time. But what I think about because of the challenge we're going through, that it's gonna change that our view of motivation making artwork. And then when you really think about like a renaissance and how the pandemics and so on. I mean, this is a reoccurring thing. So it's not first time where humanity is facing the pandemic. It's going to happen again at some point. But by doing that, and then we will reevaluate how important to be connected to each other. We're like, especially in this pandemic time, we has so much strength and desire to communicate, and then how important that is. So in some sense, because there is the wall there, because there is the separation taking place right now, and therefore that we have more of the drive to be connected and communicate. So thank you very much for putting this together, and then I'm very honored to be part of it, and we'll hope to continue producing a work, and then this might be the new standard. Who knows? So. This is
at least for the foreseeable future. Well, thank you so much, Koichi. It has really been an honor to have you, participate, and a shout out to all of our speakers today who really brought some amazing programming and discussions and perspectives. I think that we were all, even though we've all been doing like the virtual things for a little while now, I think that we're all very thirsty for that connection that events like this bring. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. Kathy, did you want to say anything, or I can go into our thank yous and then. Oh, here, I'll.
Sorry about that. Well, I guess you guys just really summed up what I was just going to say, and that I was hoping that everybody that was tuning in today felt inspired and felt some sort of connection in this weird time that we're having, and looking forward to seeing everybody in 2022 when we can be with each other.
Perseverance.
Yeah.
Well, again, thank you so much, Koichi, and we'll be sharing all of the sessions today that we've been recording. We're hoping to be able to, watch them all because we didn't get a chance to do that ourselves, and maybe do a little bit of editing, and then we'll have them available in about a week or so. So, all right. Well, I'm gonna pop you out of our stream, Koichi, but thank you again.
Bye.
Bye.